Hi, today we're going to see about preparation of fabric for cutting. In this topic, you're going to learn how to spread the fabric for cutting. Okay, for this you have to first know what is fabric, how to place the fabric before cutting, and how they are how to construct. First, we're going to see about fabric. Fabric means interlacing of two yarns. One is warp yarn and another one is weft yarn. These yarns are interlaced to each other, then it forms fabric. Next, we're going to see about grain. The word grain indicates the direction of the yarn. It means it indicates the direction of warp and weft yarn in the fabric. There are two grains. One is lengthwise grain and another one we call crosswise grain. First one, lengthwise grain. It means the warp yarn which run parallel to the selvage. Then we called the fabric is in lengthwise grain. Okay. If the weft yarn is perpendicular to the selvage, then we called it's a crosswise grain. The next one is bias, where the both warp and weft yarns does not exactly follow the lengthwise grain and also the crosswise grain, then we call its bias direction. It means the bias which falls exactly at 45-degree angle in the fabric, that's we called true bias. Later I will clearly show you in the picture. See the next slide. In this slide you can see two pictures, right? The first picture show you how the fabric is interlaced. See, you can see one is warp yarn and another one is weft yarn. They both are interlaced and form the fabric. Like this only the fabric is forming. See the second picture. See, warp yarn is indicated in blue color. It means it's in vertical direction. Warp yarn is in vertical direction. And weft yarn indicated in orange color. It's in horizontal direction. Here the weft yarn is filling yarn because the warp yarn be stable and weft yarn moves up and down into the warp yarn. This results in interlacing process. Finally we get the fabric. Next we are going to see about selvage. Did you see the fabric in shops, right? You can see the selvage on either side of the fabric. You can see two thick edges in either side of the fabric. If you not feel, you go and see in the fabric, okay? You see the fresh fabric means you see this selvage in the either side. It means some thickness be added in the either side of the fabric to avoid raveling. It means the threads be not come out. So they use selvage. They add some extra yarns in the sides of the fabric. So it will run both side of the fabric. Selvage always run in lengthwise direction. Okay, it won't go in crosswise direction. So it won't go in cross grain. Always lengthwise grain. Selvage always comes in lengthwise grain. Okay. So the width of the selvage will be half an inch always. The both side half an inch with the selvage is constructed. Here we are again going to see about grain. I already told you there are two grains. One is lengthwise grain and another one is crosswise grain, right? So what is grain? The grain is indicate the direction of the yarns. Whether the direction of the yarn is parallel to the selvage or perpendicular to the selvage, that be indicated by the word grain. Here again we can say one is on grain and another one is off grain. What is on grain means if crosswise yarn and which is exactly run right angle to the lengthwise grain means we say it's a on grain. It means the warp and weft yarns fall in right direction. The position of the both yarn should be in the proper position means we called the grain is on grain. The next off grain, the warp and weft yarn not fall in right direction. It means it not run exactly at right angle means we can say it's the fabric is off grain. Okay. See the next picture, on grain and off grain. In this picture you can clearly see what is on grain and what is off grain. See the first picture, the warp and weft yarns fall in its direction correctly. It means both warp and weft yarns are in proper place. See the second picture. You can see the small difference between first and second picture, right? See carefully in the second picture. The warp and weft yarns are slightly away from its position. That we called off grain. Okay. Next, this diagram, first see the selvage. The selvage is always in lengthwise grain. Okay. So the thickest area of both end of the fabric we called selvage. Selvage always run in only in the lengthwise grain. The line parallel to the selvage means we can called it's a lengthwise grain. Okay, it's perpendicular to the selvage means that grain we call crosswise grain. Next, bias. See in the picture, the bias is running exactly at 45-degree angle in the fabric. So you can say it's a true bias here. The bias is running exactly at 45-degree angle in the fabric means that bias we called it's a true bias. In this picture you can clearly see how much the fabric get stretching, right? Already told you there are two grains. One is lengthwise and another one is crosswise. Other than that there is bias direction, right? So why we are seeing this? You can clearly see in this picture each grain how the fabric is get stretching. So that you have to know in which grain the fabric how much gets stretched and what purpose you can use these grains. Okay, see the first picture, only you can see slight stretch on the length grain. If you stretch in lengthwise grain direction, the fabric does not give more stretch. It give only very few slight stretch. That direction we have to say lengthwise grain. The fabric is placed in lengthwise grain. Second one, compared to the first one, you can see more stretch, right? The fabric is holding crosswise grain here. That's why you can see small stretch in this fabric. Compared to the lengthwise grain, the crosswise grain gives more stretch. This be used for stout person. If you constructing garment for stout person means you can use crosswise grain. Okay. If you constructing garment for lean person means you go for lengthwise grain. Okay. It won't give more stretchable. Always the stout person need stretchable fabrics. So that's why you can use crosswise grain while placing the pattern. See the third picture, if you stretch in bias direction, then you get more flexibility. Compared to first and second, you see the third picture, how the fabric is stretching because they holding in bias direction, right? So it get more flexibility, it get more stretch, lot of stretch be given in the bias direction. But we won't use bias for constructing purpose. The bias direction we use always to construct to finish the necklines like curve lines, neckline, armhole and trimmings. For that you can use bias pieces. Other than that, for construction you always consider the grain only. You have to go for lengthwise and crosswise grain only. You don't go for bias direction. Okay. See the next picture. In the fabric, the line indicates the bias which runs exactly at 45-degree angle. So here it represent the true bias. The line exactly follow the 45-degree angle means that bias is called true bias. See selvage. The white color here, the white color is there, no? That edge is called selvage. You just touch and feel the fabric in the corner, in the sides means you can feel the thickness of the fabric. That we call selvage. Okay. So next one, importance of grain in fabric and garment construction. Why we see about lengthwise, crosswise grain and bias and all. What's the importance? Because only by having knowledge of this we can cut the fabric for construction. Okay, without this knowledge you use fabric for cutting means you will waste the fabric. So before placing the pattern for cutting, you should know what is fabric, what is grain, and what is bias also. Then only you can construct a good fit garment. So in construction you can use both lengthwise and crosswise grains. Also before buying fabric you should carefully see the fabric is in on grain or in off grain. If it in off grain, the fabric won't be used for construction. It won't give proper fit. So before purchasing the fabric you have to check the fabric is in on grain or not. Okay. So if it's in off grain means it create wrinkles. While you spread the fabric, you can't spread clearly. It forms some wrinkles, so you can't cut neatly. It gives some wrinkles, so the fitting will be affected in this fabric. The fabric get waste. So before buying the fabric, definitely you have to see the grain. The fabric is in on grain or not. Also in the printed fabric also you have to carefully see the on grain and off grain. Okay, in a printed fabric it show more. If you buy off grain printed fabric means you can't place the pattern properly and cut it. The lines will get difficult to cut. Okay, the position of the printing will be slightly vary, so it affect the construction. So before purchasing the fabric, definitely you have to notice whether the fabric is in on grain or not. So last, also work with grains and stitch with bias. Okay, for example, if you constructing blouse means the person is thin, you can go for lengthwise grain. Okay, you no need more stretch, right? For thin person they no need stretch fabric, so you can use lengthwise grain for them. If you constructing blouse for thick person means stout person, you can go for crosswise grain. Okay, because stout person needs some flexibility with fabric, so while wearing they need some flexibility. So if you use crosswise grain means while they wearing the garment they feel the stretch in crosswise grain, so they can wear comfortably. So you have to wear construct a garment for stout person in crosswise grain. They feel better fit in the crosswise grain. Okay, so always work with grain and stitch with bias. Again I say you the bias be used only in the curve lines and also for trimmings. We won't use bias for cutting. Bias direction is only used for finishing the curve edges. Thank you.